When I was in middle school, a group of kids actively made fun of another student because his dad died on Christmas Eve. Reddit: what is the worst thing you've ever seen a child do? A few years ago in high school, a girl in the grade below me died of complications from meningitis. She was a really great person and had a lot of friends, and the school mourned for a couple weeks, as it was a very sad and sudden death of such a young girl. Anyway, this bee in my Spanish class speaks up the day after the other girl's death and says, "Who gives a crap? I hurt my knee last week playing basketball and nobody did anything for me like this." The entire class stops whatever they're doing and gives her a death stare, and her friends just fake laugh and try to pretend that she didn't just say what she says. Apparently she got into deep crap with administration after that. Not deep enough to override those 16 years of self-entitled, egocentric mental development, I'm sure. There was this kid, really quiet kind too, who had these twitches during classes. Few months passed and he kept twitching around. We asked him about it and he said that it's nothing. Later on he skipped school for a few days and his mom called the teacher that he's being bullied during class. Apparently another kid, much bigger too, behind him kept poking him with a needle for months. He was so scared of the bully that he didn't want to tell anyone. This is one of the most depraved forms of bullying I have ever heard of. I became real attached to my first grade teacher, and when I was in second grade she died. I went to a private school, so they held a small funeral service at the church there and invited the students to attend. I started crying partway as it affected me so much. The kids in the next grade started pointing at me and laughing. Buttholes. They were buttholes. That's sweet that you cared so much. I know I'd cry if some of the teachers I had died. They were great. I remember first year of high school, there was a kid whose father died. He wasn't a popular kid, not a bad guy, just a bit too much of a smart butt. His dad had a heart attack. He had a week or two off. Everyone kind of felt bad for him. First week he's back at school and we have pay. Pay is usually done with another class. Out of nowhere, one of the more popular kids, from the other class, is all, "Oh, why John, did your dad die?" Everyone suddenly goes quiet thinking WTF. The kid responds with, "Yeah," holding back tears. The popular kid, out of nowhere, drops a "what if." Probably one of the most awkward situations I have ever in. I honestly couldn't believe someone could be that blatantly cold. I'll never be able to understand how people can do or say things like this. My friend's mom died of cancer when she was young. A teacher found out and she asked politely that she wouldn't tell anyone. The teacher told the class. People crack jokes about her dead mother all the time. It's horrible. I've seen a child mock another because her mother killed herself. Then he implied that she was the reason her mother killed herself. I, too, have seen children be dongs about death. The quiet child's dad died when he was 13. Had an asthma attack in the garden whilst his son was upstairs. His mother spiraled into alcoholism after that and people actually used it in arguments against him. Your mum hates you because you didn't save your dad, or just simply your dad died and you didn't notice. The worst part is people would actually defend the abuse if you ever stuck up for him. Boggles my mind. I keep reading all of these stories, and no joke, if I was a teacher and heard this going on, they would come to the principal's office with me immediately. If the principal didn't give a crap, kid would get nose to the wall timeout time. A kid mocked me in the week after my father had committed suicide. You know when you read about people going blind with rage? At 7 years old, I got that, and rained punches on him. They had to pull me off him, as I repeatedly rammed my knee into his face. He was taken to hospital. I was taken home. He never looked the same after that night. I never felt the same. I'm sorry to hear, man, but I am glad you did what you did. No one should ever get away with that. Also, the line "he never looked the same after that night, I never felt the same," needs to be in a book. Wonderfully worded. I used to teach in Korea. One of my students would openly scream profanities at female students and then slap them, punch and kick them. My co-workers wouldn't discipline him because his father is in politics and he learned this abusive nature that is directed to his mother and sister. The kid even told me in English, "I can do anything. F you foreigner." Then he slaps this girl's phone out of her hand and pushes her into the window. I knew I couldn't do anything to him, but one day walking at night this little punk is shining a laser pointer in my eyes. I chase him down in the park, grab hold of his laser pointer and cell phone, throw them as far as I could into the forest and then slapped him in the face. He bawled his eyes out. Not my proudest moment, but I think he needed it. At least in my class he wouldn't dare get out of his seat or open his mouth anymore. Not my proudest moment, but I think he needed it. Agreed. Definitely not professional, but that little shitbag needed at least one person to stand up to him. The teachers infuriate me even more than the kids in this story. Kids are buttholes. Teachers are adults responsible for preventing bullying. There is no excuse for that. No excuse other than to not getting fired for harassments to the students. Patents love to blame the teachers and everyone else instead of having their little angel be in trouble. A girl in my school had some growing disorder, so she was roughly the size of a 2-year-old and had to use a wheelchair. One day over the intercom the school announced that she had died in her sleep the night before. One of the kids in my class said, "I'm glad she died. She wasted food and oxygen for the people who deserve it." Everyone laughed. And that's when you stand up, knock him out of his chair with a haymaker, and sit back down without saying a word. I saw a group of 4 boys throwing rocks at a dying kitten in the gutter. Little bastards took off running when I stopped the car. Poor little thing died by the time I could wrap him in a shirt. It was so sick sad that I cried every time I thought about it. Every year, until a few years ago, the ducks haven't returned to that pond anymore after winter. There used to be kids in our village that, during springtime, picked up the little ducklings and smashed them on the pavement. When I was in high school my father was arrested and sent to prison. I received an anonymous note from someone in my school that he was getting fricked in the butt in jail. Ugh. My dad died when I was 15. I walked in and found him. This little bee at school, sophomore in HS at the time, spread the rumor that he committed suicide. It was my first day back, died on WED, I was back on MON, and I had to deal with so much crap. Sympathy, questions about how he died, and then finally people asking me why he killed himself. Horrid. I've seen an extremely nice kid go show his new toy to his friends, only to have it snatched out of hands by one of them. They played with it for the extent of the time that they were there, paying no attention to the kid whose toy it was, but the kid almost seemed content, knowing that they actually thought something he had was cool. After they got bored of it, they went and dropped it back in the kid's lap and told him that the toy sucked and that he should have gotten something else. I almost cried. This happened to me in kindergarten. The difference though is after my new friend was done with my stuffed penguin she threw it on the 2-story roof. I was inconsolable until the janitor got out his giant ladder and saved my buddy. Funny, I still remember that so vividly a quarter century later. I honestly don't know why I keep looking into these dang questions on Ask Reddit. The responses just pee me off, gross me out, or disturb me. Freaking kids. This was in big school, but this kid hit and killed a pedestrian 2 weeks after getting his license. Well, it was a small town, so talk got out quick, so first period the next day a girl says, "Hey, so I hear you're killing people now." And I on multiple occasions would see him walking in the hall and people would jump out of the way and yell, "Whoa, don't kill me too." High school has no mercy. On the flip side, a kid I went to HS with snorted a bunch of coke and went for a drive. He ended up killing a boy in our grade, that boy's brother, and their 2-year-old niece. People gave him pats on the back for it because the kids he killed were from Burma and didn't speak English well. Oh, and another one. I was caused, whoops, a kitchen fire when I was in the 8th grade. My arm elbow was severely burned. When I went back to school, I had to keep my arm in my lap because even though it was all bandaged up, the girl next to me didn't want it anywhere near her. Then in 10th grade, it was all healed and scared up. It turned into some kind of keloid scar where it was all raised and straight up purple. I was taking a test and had my arm resting on my desk. The way the room was set up, there were about 10 desks facing one way and the other 10 or so were facing those 10. Well, the guy directly in front of me, both in the front row, facing each other, looked over at me in the middle of the quiet room test and was like, "Get that disgusting thing off the desk. I can't concentrate." I went and had surgery on it the next week. 3 surgeries later and it still looks like crap. Sucker. Throwaway account. Scout camp. A tent of about 8 kids, ranging from 11-14 years of age. The 2 eldest lads in the tent decided they would pick on the smallest chapter. He was about 11. They were 14-15. They held their big lighters upside down, heating up the metal part of it, then burned the kid on the face and arms, and they tape recorded it. I can't remember at this stage why we didn't do anything. We were all in there. It was nighttime. And when I think about it and the consequences, I always feel deeply ashamed. I guess we were just too young or intimidated. But maybe it was just easier to lie there and pretend to be asleep while he was screaming. I was 12 or 13. Somebody did tell and they were caught. I'm not sure exactly what kind of punishment they got. It was a school-related scout camp. But certainly something happened. Not as much as expulsion though, which is what should have happened. And there was definitely no police involvement, which there also should have been. Fast forward some years and the little lad is grown up and in court for the murder of his girlfriend and her mother. During the court it turned out that he'd been subjected to a litany of abuse as a child. Domestic. From his father. And when I think about what those older kids did to him, I'd love to go back to that time and stand up for him. Bravery in hindsight doesn't make me much of a person, but there you go. I have no doubt what happened to him in that tent played a big part in how his life turned out and how that impacted on others. I also hope those 2 have had horrible lives themselves. Or are dead. I'd prefer that. You were young. Don't blame yourself. There was this one kid who has a mental disability. Extreme case. He would get so frustrated and upset for the littlest of things. One day he brought a dog to her school. The dog wore a vest that says therapy dog. The principal and teachers that he's in the class in would tell us that the dog is only meant to help him cope with his frustration. They told us not to pet him without the boy's permission. You can't even look at the dog's direction. Doing so will lead you a referral to the office. The kids in the class would usually pat the dog behind his back and point at the kid and laugh at him when he was walking with the dog in the hallway. One kid even put a piece of chocolate on the floor next to the dog. He was happy though that he can be with the dog. Sometimes he would defend himself and the kids would pick on him and laugh at him more. I freaking hate the kids in my high school. If someone willfully tried to poison my dog, I would end them. I once knew a kid that was a little messed up in the head. He looked like a huge hillbilly mental case. He was nice though, but very socially inept. He was molested as a child, and he had PTSD from it. For many people, smells trigger memories, but there was a TV commercial that was his trigger. The Oscar Mayer hot dog. He was molested while this song played and several others. I only knew because I heard my parents talking about it in the back of a very loud bus one day. I noticed him lying down in his seat and several other people standing up around him singing the Oscar Mayer Wiener song. Their voices were forceful, like they were trying to hit him with it. He is crying and screaming and trying to plug his ears while writhing around in his seat. Bus driver got on because it was time to head out of the school and everything stopped, but he ran off of the bus crying and everyone laughed. I never saw him again. Kids in my class teased a girl because her mum went skydiving and the parachute didn't open. Truly fricked up. My friend made fun of my cousin who was seriously injured in the war and how my mother had breast cancer. I am no longer affiliated with her. When I was a kid, my brother died. I was 8, so I talked about it. My classmates always used to ask me about it. Hey Silgranus, Her Silgranus, remember your brother who died? I'm a teacher and had a student give out rewards to students who would be mean to a certain student in the class. The sad thing was every student in the class of 27 4th graders did it. I finally had one student confess to me what was going on. Called the kid's mom and she asked which student was being bullied and then responded, well, I can understand that. I have never been made speechless by a parent until then. When I was in 7th grade, there was a mentally retarded girl. I don't know what her exact issue was, but there was something mentally wrong. The kids used to throw coins at her and tell her to dance for more. She didn't understand and wanted the change for soda machines. I used to try to get her to just sit down with me or even just give her a buck, but she just couldn't understand cruelty, I suppose. It used to make my blood boil when she would call them her friends. That's so douchy. The only consolation I get is that she didn't understand that they were making fun of her. It's hard to be hurt by something you don't know is supposed to be hurtful. Also, thanks for not pretending like you didn't see anything, or, God forbid, joining in. I remember in 8th grade, a number of guys from my class made fun of this girl who had big ears. It also didn't help that her mom went out and bought lunch for her and her friends every day from places like Applebee's, Ruby Tuesdays, etc. Eventually, she got teased so much that she ended up getting a surgery to reduce them. Unfortunately, the teasing didn't end until our grade graduated. Posted this before in a similar thread. Even relating this story makes me sick to my stomach. When I was in the 4th grade, a classmate of mine lost his mother to cancer. Not long afterwards, we had a show and tell day where we were to bring in something that was special to us. This boy brought in a metal slinky and explained that the reason it was important to him was because it was the last thing his mother got him before she died. Afterwards, as we were all walking to the cafeteria, one of the well-known little shitheads, actually the smallest kid in school but a huge bully because his father was a coach and his mother the school nurse, ran up to him and asked to see the slinky. The boy who lost his mother, thrilled that someone was actually speaking to him as he was normally ostracized and picked on, gladly handed it over to him. The little shithead then violently tied the slinky into several knots and threw it on the ground, ruining it. He ran away laughing to the cheers of the other students as the other boy just stared at the ground expressionless and obviously lost. The poor kid didn't even cry. I would have beat the ever little crap out of the kid, probably killed him. Some teachers suck. My sister had a classmate whose mother was their homeroom teacher, so for her birthday, my sister was throwing this big birthday party and of course invited the whole class. My parents spend all this money and the day of the party comes and no one from school shows up. The next Monday my sister's teacher, classmate's mom, come up to my sister and says, "You know why no one went to your party? Because my daughter decided to have a party on the same day and everyone that came to her party got extra credit points." This is freaking ridiculous. That is so fricked up. Christ, that is so wrong. This isn't so awful but here it goes. My friend and I found these spiked balls that grew on a tree near our house. When you crush them up they turn into a powder fiber that itches like crazy. We started to collect these and sell them in plastic bags to kids at school. 25c for a small one and 50c for a big one. About a week later the school started to mention it and complained about all the kids ending up at the nurse because of itching powder. At that time we decided to bow out of the game. Altogether we made about $20. That's a heck of a lot of money to an 8-year-old. Right before my Christmas break in 8th grade, one of my good friends lost his sister 6 days before Christmas. She was killed in a head-on collision with a drunk driver at about 7 in the evening on her first night back home from college. He was originally supposed to be in the car, but she told him they would hang out another night. Once getting back to school, most people were very sympathetic as his sister was a very accomplished runner and babysat for a few dozen families and a lot of the kids knew her. But there was a small group of about 3 kids who made fun of him on a daily basis, saying if he liked his Christmas present and making up gruesome stories about her death and some even drawing cartoons about her accident. The same thing happened about 2 years prior to another kid whose dad shot himself with a shotgun. Relentless teasing. People making shotgun sounds around him and saying he didn't have any brains, just like his dad. He eventually left the school until we started 9th grade. My daughter is 2 years old and her cousin who is 4 was over. My daughter loves to dance, which really just involves her jumping and spinning and waving her arms. Well, we were outside and I turned on some music, so naturally she starts dancing and laughing because it's her favorite thing in the world to do. Then her cousin just stares at her with a disgusted face and says that's how she dances. When my daughter heard her say that and saw the expression on her face, she stopped and kind of looked down and was sad the rest of the day. That's the first time I realized as a parent that people are going to do crappy things to your kids and sadly you can't protect them from getting their feelings hurt. This broke my heart. Coming from a woman pregnant with her first, this terrifies me. I don't want to think how awful it will feel the first time this realization sets in. Told this in another thread, describing a particular experience when I was a 3rd grade teacher. I had a student whose parents were abusive. It was evident by the physical marks. However, school administration could never do anything for multiple reasons. Anyways, the cops were called to boy's house one afternoon just a few weeks before summer vacation. They discovered that the boy had tortured local neighborhood cats by trapping them in makeshift cardboard cages and then lighting the box on fire. Apparently he used a magnifying glass to sear the cat's fur and would let them out disfigured but alive so he could continue at another point. Most were stray cats, however the cops finally found out when a passerby saw the kid stick a firework up a cat's behind and thereafter throw it hammer style across an overpass. Really fricked and never heard from the kid since. The parents ended up splitting and pretty sure the kid went to live with his grandmother. TLDR. Sadist student operates a cat version of Guantanamo Bay. Gets caught after engaging in a public display of live fireworks. I would not want to be that kid's grandmother. I had a pretty yuck childhood. Mom used to whip me with the electric cord. Threatened to kill me for slight infractions. I was really socially awkward and never had clean clothes. Malnourished. Always sick. Basically, I was the freak kid in grade school. One day a neighbor kid invited me over to play at her house. I was a latchkey kid and wasn't allowed to leave the house when mom was at work. But the offer to actually play with another kid was too good to be true, so I disobeyed and went over to her house thinking that I'd just go home before mom got home from work. I was over there playing when I heard my mother's VW bug drive by and lost my crap. Started crying, begging the mom not to send me home because my mom might kill me, which I thought was true given that I'd get the life beat out of me for missing a spot on the dishes. I didn't dare disobey. The girl's mother went and got my mother, who of course acted all nice and normal in front of her, and then beat the freaking heck out of me as soon as we walked in the door. I still have physical scars from that one. The next day I went to school with lash marks and bruises. The little girl told everyone that my mommy beat me. Some of the worst bullies actually followed me home from school that day taunting me with songs of, "Your mama beats you. Your mama beats you and you deserve it. Comma Jesus. That was terrible. TLDR. Mom beat the crap out of me. Adults did nothing to protect me. The other kids made fun of me for it. God, I am so sorry. Your childhood. It was awful." I have a cousin who, for a variety of reasons I will never speak to or be in a 100-mile radius of, would do very cruel things to animals. When we were children he threw a rock at a dove and knocked its eye out. He stopped throwing things at it because I began to cry. He then tried to cheer me up by attempting to drown some kittens. These are just some of the lesser evil things he ended up doing. Pretty sure that is an early sign of a sociopath or a serial killer. Ex-co-workers would make fun of me behind my back because I was raped by a co-worker. They liked my co-worker more than they liked me. That's fricked up. I don't even know what to say to that. Sue them all. This isn't so tragic, but my teacher told everyone I had Asperger's syndrome. They would all call me retard and be physical. Sucked. Jesus freaking Christ. I snapped one day. I would have all sorts of accidents, and when they are like, dude, WTF man, you stained my clothes with your cola. Are you freaking stupid? I'd say you told me I was a retard. So I guess that is correct. Had couple of friends who would keep their mouth shut since they understood that the bullies deserved it. Besides, I realized I could get away with any form of punishment because I was disabled, according to my dumb teacher, and anyone who chose to bully me would be very severely punished. Thank God I increased my dosage of Ritalin and that crap a year later. I was probably in 7th grade, on a field trip with my class. A few classmates found 2 kittens and their mother in a patch of grass under a tree. The mom took one of them to safety ASAP, but they managed to grab the second before she returned. The mother kitty had to watch as 3 of my classmates kicked the kitten around until it couldn't even meow anymore. By the time one of us got our supervisor, one big dude that was barely over 20, the kitten was bloodied and dead. The supervisor cried when he saw the mangled kitten and the lamenting mother, and when the bullies called him a girly girl over it he snapped and beat the living snot out of them, still crying over the kitten. And when I say beat, I mean broken noses, bruised eyes, proper frick up. The supervisor got a stern talking to and the kids got a trip to the counselor, grounded, and had to stay 3 extra hours in school every day for about 3 months. It's been so many years, but I still remember exactly what the mother cat looked and sounded like and still hate those guys with a passion. Freaking monsters. They're still cruel as frick, and one of them went to jail for beating his girlfriend because she hadn't finished dinner by the time he got home. I remember learning about the Holocaust in the 6th grade. I told some friends about how my grandmother visited some of the concentration camps when she lived in Germany while her father was in the service. These kids thought I meant my grandmother actually lived in a concentration camp. They made jokes, poked fun, a bunch of stuff you would find inappropriate. Even though my grandmother didn't actually go through that, it still surprises me how mean kids can be towards things like this. My story is about the terrible thing I did as a kid. There was a girl in my class in elementary school whose family didn't have a lot of money. Her parents both worked multiple jobs, so they weren't around a lot to tell her to do important things like shower or change her clothes every day. She lived down the block from me, so I would play with her if no one else was around, but mostly I would pick on her. It was my daily mission at school to make her cry. I was usually successful. One day after school, the two of us were on the playground. I was waiting for my mom to pick me up. I'm not sure why she was hanging around, but I was doing my usual thing with her, playing with her on the swings while saying mean things to her and walking away from her to make her upset. She started to cry. I laughed. Then I noticed my mom's car in the parking lot and ran over without even saying goodbye to this girl. I went to open the front passenger door to the car and my mother said, "Number," in the back. I got in the back and started chattering about my day and asking what was for dinner. Blah blah blah. My mother never said a word. This was not like her and I knew something was wrong, so I asked if she was okay. No response. I asked if she was mad at me. No response. This went on for the entire ride home, and by the time we got there, I was crying so hysterically over the fact that my mom wouldn't talk to me that I could barely open the car door. When we got in the house, she finally spoke to me and she said, "This is how you made that girl feel today." She had seen my entire playground performance from the car. I apologized to that girl the next day and I never picked on her again. To this day I get a sick feeling in my stomach when I think of my sweet, soft-spoken mother refusing to talk to me or let me ride next to her because she was so disappointed in me. To think I intentionally caused a similar feeling in someone else sickens me still. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.